In the summer of 1964, 3 civil rights workers vanished in Mississippi, and the FBI hit a dead end. Witnesses were terrorized. Local police were complicit. So the Bureau did something almost no one has ever heard about. They hired a mafia killer to break the Klan. Gregory Scarpa, a Colombo capo known as the Grim Reaper, with an estimated 50 murders to his name, was handed $10,000 and sent south to extract a confession by any means necessary. To understand why the FBI crossed that line, you need to see how dark Mississippi had become. James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner arrived in Mississippi with a sense of mission that summer. They were young, idealistic, and determined to challenge the state's brutal system of segregation. Alongside nearly 1,000 other volunteers, they joined Freedom Summer, an effort to register black voters and teach in makeshift schools, risking everything to chip away at Jim Crow's grip. Most were college students, some from the North, others local. All understood the dangers. The Ku Klux Klan, backed by local officials, had made their intentions clear. Outsiders and activists would not be tolerated. On June 21, 1964, Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner set out for Neshoba County to investigate the burning of Mount Zion Baptist Church, a sanctuary for civil rights meetings that had been reduced to ashes just days earlier. The drive was routine, but the threat was constant. That afternoon, a deputy sheriff pulled them over on a rural road near Philadelphia, Mississippi. What followed was not an ordinary traffic stop. The 3 were arrested, held for hours, then released into the night. They never made it home. By morning, their car was found abandoned and torched. The men had vanished. Word spread quickly through the movement. Volunteers huddled in church basements, trading rumors and bracing for the worst. The disappearance sent a chill through the ranks. In the first weeks of Freedom Summer, activists had already faced beatings, firebombings, and threats. But this was different. 3 men, 1 black, 2 white, had simply disappeared into the Mississippi night. The stakes became painfully clear. The Klan's violence was not random. It was organized, calculated, and protected by a network that stretched from the back roads to the courthouse. Local law enforcement offered no help. Witnesses kept silent, fearing for their lives. The sense of isolation was complete. The disappearance of Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner was more than a tragedy. It was a message. Anyone who challenged the system could be made to vanish. For the families, hope faded as days passed with no word. For the movement, the loss became a rallying cry. National outrage grew, and the case forced the federal government to act. The search for the missing men would become one of the most intense manhunts in American history, but the machinery of justice was up against something far darker than ordinary crime. In Mississippi that summer, the line between law and lawlessness had all but dissolved. Silence blanketed Mississippi in the weeks after the disappearance. Federal agents fanned out across Neshoba County, knocking on doors, scouring back roads, and combing through burned-out churches. Each lead faded into the same wall of silence. Local authorities, sworn to uphold the law, turned their backs or offered only shrugs. In sheriff's offices, files went missing. Deputies claimed not to remember who was on duty. Requests for search warrants stalled in the courthouse. When agents pressed for cooperation, they faced thinly veiled threats or blank stares. Behind closed doors, the pressure mounted. Internal FBI memos from July 1964 record mounting frustration. One agent wrote, "The entire county is paralyzed by fear." Witnesses who might have seen something kept their heads down, terrified of Klan retaliation. A single whispered word to the wrong person could mean a cross burned in the yard, a beating, or worse. The Klan's network ran deep into city halls, police departments, even the state legislature. No one wanted to be the first to talk. The Justice Department demanded answers. With the election looming, senior officials in Washington demanded results. Director J. Edgar Hoover's office sent telegrams to the field. Report progress daily. No excuses. But progress was in short supply. The FBI's own intelligence on the Klan was thin, built on a handful of unreliable informants. Every day without a break in the case made the Bureau look weaker, fueling outrage in the national press. Civil rights leaders called the lack of arrests a disgrace. Families of the missing men waited by the phone, hoping for news that never came. Inside the FBI's Mississippi field office, morale sagged. Agents worked 18-hour days, but the investigation spun in circles. One July memo, stamped confidential, cited election year pressure as a growing concern. The risk of failure was not just professional, it was personal. Some agents received anonymous threats. Others found their tires slashed or their homes watched by strangers. The sense of being surrounded, outnumbered, and unwelcome was constant. By the second week of July, the Bureau's options were running out. Standard procedures, including interviews, subpoenas, and surveillance, had hit a dead end. Local law enforcement was no help. The Klan's grip on the county was absolute. The search for Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner had become a race against time, with every day lost deepening the sense of desperation. The FBI needed a new approach, something outside the rulebook, to break through the wall of fear and silence that protected the killers. A single voucher, stamped July 20th, 1964, began its journey through the upper ranks of the FBI. The document was brief. It authorized $10,000 for confidential source operations in Mississippi. The amount was staggering for a single informant, especially in a region where field agents struggled to justify expenses for gasoline and motel rooms. Yet the paperwork crossed desks with little resistance. The special agent in charge of the Mississippi field office signed off first, citing operational necessity. The voucher moved up to Washington and landed on the desk of Deputy Assistant Director John M. Davis. Davis, known for his caution, added his signature in a hurried scrawl. The memo language was deliberately vague: payment for actionable intelligence leading to the recovery of missing persons. No names, no mention of the Mafia, just a coded nod to something outside the rulebook. The cash would be drawn from a discretionary fund reserved for informant operations, an account with few questions asked and even fewer answers given. The FBI vault's declassified files show the voucher logged as CSV 1964 0715, with the purpose listed as Delta Region Intelligence. The chain of approvals ended with a final sign-off by the Assistant Director for Operations, who scribbled, "Approved, essential to case." The money was to be delivered in unmarked bills with a cover story in place. The recipient was to be paid as a private investigator from New York for services rendered in a missing persons case. The actual recipient, Gregory Scarpa, was never named in the paperwork. Inside the Bureau, a handful of senior officials understood what was happening. The pressure from Washington, the wall of silence in Mississippi, and the looming election had forced their hand. The voucher was not just a financial transaction. It was a quiet surrender to desperation. The FBI internal memos from July 1964 reveal unease among some agents. One noted in the margin, "Is this really necessary?" But the signatures kept coming. The operation was greenlit. The money moved. No one outside the highest circles would ever see the full story. The paper trail was designed to disappear into the archives, buried among thousands of routine expenses. Yet that summer, in the middle of a civil rights crisis, the nation's top law enforcement agency authorized a cash payment to a mafia enforcer, an act that blurred the line between justice and compromise. The machinery of bureaucracy had quietly set something extraordinary in motion. Gregory Scarpa was born in Brooklyn in 1928, raised in Red Hook, where violence was a currency and trust was earned at gunpoint. By his 20s, Scarpa had already become a fixture on the South Brooklyn docks, running rackets for the Colombo family. His reputation grew quickly, both feared and respected. Police files listed him as a suspect in dozens of crimes, but it was his own crew who gave him the name that would stick, the Grim Reaper. The nickname was not just for show. In the early 1960s, bodies started turning up, bookmakers shot execution style, extortionists left in alleys. The killings bore Scarpa's signature, cold, efficient, and unsolved. By 1963, he had risen to capo, commanding up to 20 men and controlling rackets from Carroll Gardens to the Brooklyn waterfront. FBI and court records from the era tie him to armed robbery, illegal gambling, and at least a dozen contract murders. Some investigators put his true body count at over 50. Scarpa's violence was never random. He enforced the Colombo family's interests with a .38 special and a reputation for settling scores personally. Witnesses learned to keep quiet, those who did not rarely survive to testify. The FBI's FD 302 reports described him as methodical and ruthless, loyal only to his own rules. But Scarpa was more than muscle. He understood leverage. He knew where bodies were buried, both literally and figuratively. That made him dangerous not just to rivals, but to anyone who crossed him, inside or outside the law. By the late 1950s, Scarpa was already walking a double line. He began quietly cooperating with federal agents, trading information for protection, or to eliminate his own enemies. The first documented contact came in 1960, when Special Agent R. Lindley DeVecchio met Scarpa in a Brooklyn bar. Scarpa offered up details on rival mobsters in exchange for cash and legal favors. Over time, the relationship deepened. The FBI needed someone who could move in the shadows. Scarpa needed cover and an edge in the mob's shifting power games. It was a partnership built on mutual need and mutual distrust. By 1964, Scarpa's standing in the Colombo family and his ties to DeVecchio made him the FBI's weapon of choice. He could cross state lines without suspicion, intimidate the hardest men, and extract secrets no badge could reach. Money, protection, leverage, and a taste for power drove him. When the FBI came calling, Scarpa saw opportunity, a chance to do what he did best, with federal backing and a fat envelope of untraceable cash. In the blurred space between law and crime, Scarpa was the man you called when every other door was locked. July 12, 1964. The air in Neshoba County was thick with fear, but Gregory Scarpa moved with a different kind of purpose. He carried no badge, just a New York accent and a small, heavy pistol tucked in his waistband. The FBI had flown him in under a false name, armed him with a cover story, and pointed him toward the Klan's inner circle. Official channels had failed. Now, a mafia enforcer was the government's secret weapon. Scarpa's target was James B. Perry, a Klan lieutenant known for his silence and his loyalty. Perry had watched the FBI's search parties from a distance, certain that no one could make him talk. That illusion shattered when Scarpa appeared at his door. The details of what happened next never made it into any FD 302 report. According to courtroom testimony from years later, Scarpa dragged Perry from his home in the dead of night, drove him to an abandoned farmhouse, and sat him down at a battered kitchen table. The threat was not subtle. Scarpa pressed the barrel of his pistol against Perry's teeth, demanding answers. When Perry hesitated, Scarpa struck him across the face once, twice, hard enough to leave blood on the floorboards. The violence was methodical, each blow a message the rules had changed. Perry broke. Sobbing, he gave up the secret that had eluded federal agents for weeks. He described a shallow grave on a remote farm outside Philadelphia, Mississippi. He named the men who had helped bury Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. He traced the route the killers took, the landmarks they passed, the spot where the bodies now lay. Scarpa wrote it down on a scrap of paper, handed it to his FBI contact, and vanished back into the shadows. There was no official acknowledgement, no paperwork linking Scarpa to the confession. The Bureau's own summary simply noted that actionable intelligence had been received from a confidential source. But for the first time since the disappearance, federal agents had coordinates, real, precise, and deadly serious. The breakthrough came not from forensic science or legal process, but from a raw act of underworld brutality. In the end, the wall of silence that protected the Klan fell to the same kind of violence they had used to enforce it. The FBI's desperation had rewritten the rules of the search, and the price was paid in blood and secrets. August 4, 1964. Federal agents stood at the edge of Old Jolly Farm, shovels in hand, the ground damp and heavy. After weeks of fruitless searching, a hand-drawn map born from a confession finally led them to a patch of disturbed earth. By midday, the diggers uncovered the bodies of James Cheney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, buried side by side beneath a thin layer of clay. The violence was unmistakable. Cheney's jaw shattered, Goodman's ribs broken, all three marked by gunfire and blunt trauma. A forensic team from Washington worked through the night, cataloging every wound. The official autopsy, filed before the week's end, left no doubt about the brutality. News reached the families first, then swept across the country, confirming the movement's worst fears and giving the FBI the evidence it needed, though the details of the confession remained locked away in secret files. With the bodies found, the case shifted from muddy fields to the courtroom. The Justice Department assembled a federal prosecution team under Assistant Attorney General John Duar. Mississippi refused to bring murder charges, so prosecutors turned to civil rights conspiracy laws. Their case hinged on the testimony of the Klansman whose confession had broken the silence. Defense attorneys attacked the confession, calling it coerced and unreliable. The judge faced a stark choice: exclude the evidence on legal grounds, or admit it for the sake of justice. In a ruling that would echo for years, the court allowed the testimony, citing the overwhelming public interest in accountability. The trial opened in October 1967. 7 men, including Deputy Sheriff Cecil Price and Klan leader Sam Bowers, faced federal charges. The jury listened to accounts of secret meetings, coded messages, and the chain of events that led to the murders. Prosecutors traced the violence from the woods to the sheriff's office, while the families of the victims watched from the gallery. After days of testimony, the jury delivered its verdict: 7 convicted, 8 acquitted, several mistrials. For the first time in Mississippi, white men were found guilty of crimes against civil rights workers. Sentences were short, no more than 10 years, but the convictions sent shockwaves through the old order. Relief mingled with unease, as the means of justice left questions that would linger for decades. To this day, few stories reveal a stranger collision of power than the secret deal the FBI made with a mafia killer to break the Klan's wall of silence. When justice turns to brutality for answers, the lines between right and wrong blur, sometimes forever. In an era still grappling with institutional trust and hidden alliances, this episode warns: who we empower in darkness shapes the world we inherit. Share your thoughts below